Now this is a follow-up to the video that I did on YouTube about something called So You Think You're Doing Gann Angles. And from time to time I get stuff off people, and this was kindly sent by a guy called Joe, and I saw it, started reading what he said. There's quite a bit to it, but basically he was saying something quite simple, which sounded to me very interesting. So I thank him for that. And in fact, what he actually says did come true. His prediction was that the October 24th to the 28th could be an important point for a change in trend. Now he sent this to me I think in October, early October, and the 24th of October is there, and the 28th of October is there. So we basically got a turning point. The market rose to those dates and it turned. However, one of the problems I have with cycles, and why I don't use them, is because unless you get the exact day right, you can lose a huge amount of money. So you might have decided to trade it on the 24th or the 25th or the 26th, and then the market goes shooting up and it hits your stop loss and you lose money. So that's the problem with those. However, for a completely different reason to what Joe said, I thought that was a turning point due to using Gann angles. However, let's go to what he said, because this is quite interesting and it brings up another problem. Data is incredibly important, especially when you're doing Gann angles. Now, I'll just do one of the things he said because it's quite in depth, but basically what he said was on the S&P that this low here was made at 666.79, or if we just take 666. And then what he said was that if you add 333 days to that low, it gives you the next major low that it made here. Now obviously 333 is half of 666. Hopefully I won't bring the devil into this too much. And so what he said was that the next one for the future would be another 333 days into the future, and he's got some of the timings, and that's why he came to the date of the 24th to the 28th of October. And I thought that's really interesting, so I decided to do it myself. So I started up my software, and if we go back into the past and rescale it, so I thought very interesting. So I went to the major low, and it was made, as he said, at 666, and I went to my cycle part of the program, which I don't actually use, but it's there if you need to use it, and I added 333 days, which is half of 666, which would be 50% in time of that low he was saying. So I put it on. Now what he said was that, and showed, was that the low here was 333 days to that level. However, you can see that now I've put on 333, there's a massive difference. I've got it about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 12 days back to what he was saying. So the software he was using was showing it in a completely different position. So I just came to the obvious conclusion that either my software's wrong or the software he's using was a load of rubbish, because they're coming out in completely different dates. So I was a bit worried about this, and so I had to find out if I was right or the software he was using was correct. So the first thing I asked myself was, how many days did my program think it was? Well, my program thought it was 344 days to the actual low that it made at the beginning or end of June, beginning of July. So what I did is I went to the internet and I stuck in the date that this low was made and the date that this low was made, and asked it how many days it was. So the start date was made on the 6th of the 3rd 2009, and the date that the low was made was on the 1st of the 7th 2010. So I asked it how many days it was in between the two, and it tells you here that it's actually 482 days between the two. Now I said that my program said it was 443 I think, and his program said it was 333. Now the reason there's a difference is because that includes Saturdays and Sundays, and obviously there's no trading on Saturdays and Sundays. And so what we need to do is we take 482 and we divide it by 7, which is how many days there are in a week, and that gives you 68.85 something. and then multiply that by 5 days in a week. And what that actually gives you is 344 trading days between the two dates. And as I showed you, mine says it's 344 trading days from that point there to that point there. And so the actual result that you got was correct, but it's actually based on, well, rubbish is the right word, because that low he said was 50% of it, but you can see that it's wrong. So my basic conclusion was that basically the software we was using was completely wrong. Now later on he sent me the following chart with a 1x1 angle on, and this software actually does it the way Gann said you should do it, and not like a Gann fan, which, as I told you in the first video, was in my humble opinion is a load of rubbish. But this software actually does the angle correctly. Now the low here was made at 666, and he's saying that it took 374 days from this low to get to here, and this angle goes up at the rate of 1 penny every day. So if you add to the low at 666 how many days it took to get where it touched the angle, which is 374, and add that to 666, you get 1040, and that low there is actually made at 1040. So Gann would say that time is equal to price and a potential buying opportunity at that point. Okay, very interesting. So what I did was I tried it with my software. So remember that he was talking about this point here hitting at that particular angle. Now I drew an angle that went up at this rate of 1 penny every day, and you can see that mine hits it in a completely different position. Mine hits it here, whereas his hit it to give it this low here. So again, I could have been wrong, so what I need to do was actually to check if that was actually right. Now I've already shown you that my software said from this low here, it was actually 344 trading days to that low, which is actually correct, as I showed you when we worked it out before. So this low here is actually made at 10:10:91. So we'll call it 10:10. So the low's made at 666 point something, which is okay. It's made it at the right low. .78, and I've told you it's 344 days. So plus 344 days, and that gives us 10:10:78. And this low here was made at 10:10:91. So basically 10:10, it's exactly correct. So that's actually where time and price have squared, not here. In other words, because there's something either wrong with his software or wrong with his data, he's got the wrong place, even though it happened to look like it worked. Now in fact I know that the 1x1 daily is completely the wrong angle to use anyway, but we'll look at that a little bit later on. So I thought, okay, I needed to find out what the answer was, and he told me what the software was called, so I got a copy. Now the software doesn't actually come with any data, so I got some data off our own data. We provide data for our clients via the software as well, which we've been collecting for many years. Now my first conclusion was that it was just the software that was complete rubbish. So I got his software, and I imported my own data from our own database, and I put the 1x1 angle on, and you can see that it goes through exactly the same position as where it does with my software. And using his timing thing, it says it's 343 days. I said it was 344, but that just depends if you count the first day as 0 or 1. And so in other words, the angle, the 1x1 daily angle, is actually drawn in exactly the same place. So the obvious conclusion is not the software that's wrong, it's actually the data that was wrong. So I asked him where he got the data from, and what he does, he imports the data, or imported the data from another service that he had, and then imports it into that software for doing the angles. So you can see how easy it is to do something completely wrong, because you assume that what you're getting off somebody else is right, but obviously it's not. So it's not just the software that's important, it's also the data behind it, because the most important factor according to Gann was time. And if you haven't got the time factor correct, then obviously you're going to get it completely and utterly wrong. In his particular case, he was a bit lucky because it did happen to give a low, but that just happened to be luck. Now, just like the previous one, on so you think you're doing Gann angles that I did, I said that there was a master time factor that applies to different items, and one of the secrets is to find out what the master time factor is. And I said that the S&P had a certain master time factor, which isn't the norm, so to speak. And now, again, I'm going to keep it to myself unless you become a client, but I'm going to change. This angle here happens to work, but it only happens to work because of a coincidence in time. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on the other angles that Gann would have said in his books and courses to put on. And as I said before, and I'll do it on my software because it's going to be easier, but the one above a 1x1 would have been a 2x1, and you can quite obviously see that when it got to the 2x1 it didn't work, it just went straight through it. And the next angle below a 1x1, what is a 1x2? And if we scroll that into the future, it either hasn't got there yet or it hasn't worked. Now those two lines there are just timings from the previous chart, but it hasn't got to that angle yet, and it went up before that ever happened. But this works, you just need to know how it works. So what I'm going to show you is how it actually works without giving you the master time factor on this particular item. Now firstly, what I should say is that I found this pretty hard. I have changed the master time factor now, but I started off because I didn't know it was going to be quite difficult doing what you would normally do from a Gann point of view. I did a 1x1, but you can see it's in a completely different position because I've changed the master time factor, which is awfully too flat. So the next one will be 2, the next one will be 4, the next one will be 8. So let's put an 8x1 on. Then it would be a 16, then it would be a 32, and then it would be a 64. Now on the previous video on So You Think You're Doing Gann angles, you saw that those numbers worked incredibly well, coming down from the high to give you all the tops. Pretty much exactly, but you can see on the way up they're not working. I also use half angles, so 24 and 32, 24 and 48 I would also have on. So you can see that it worked here, it didn't quite get to it here, it broke through it by a bit here, it didn't work here, it didn't work here, it doesn't work at the 60 in the future, and it just doesn't work. And when so from my point of view, when I'm trading, I'm waiting for it to get to this level, then it breaks through it by quite a lot. That puts me off doing it, so I don't do it. And then it did the same thing. But over time, the market gives you clues about what's actually working. So over time, started watching it, and I always ask myself the question, what's worked in the past? Now there's a lot of things you don't know, and so I'm just going to keep it incredibly simple, which is what I base everything on. But this started to work on some numbers that I wouldn't normally use. It started to work on certain odd numbers. Now I'm not going to do the whole thing, but the first thing I did, I asked myself what that low was made on, and it was actually made on an angle that goes up at the rate of 34 points per master time period, and I always cut the angle when it gets broken. Now I know that that is based on a certain number, an odd number, and it's based on the odd number that's half of it. If you divide 34 by 2 you get 17, and 17 can't be divided again without getting a decimal place, so in effect that's based on the odd number of 17. And I asked myself what that low there was made on, and the closest one I could find was a 29 by 1, which is an odd number, one that I would never use without the benefit of hindsight. And then I asked myself what this was made on, which angle was the closest to that, and I found that the closest one was 25 to give me this low here. Again, I cut the angle when the price broke below it, which was there. So in effect that means 17, not 34, so it's an odd number. That one's 29, that's 25, so there is an odd number halfway between those two, which is 27. Now it actually did work, it actually worked for a day, but the pattern to me seemed to be that it was every other odd number, so 29, 25, but at this stage I still wasn't 100% sure. So the next odd number below 25 is actually 23, which doesn't work, and the next one below that one is 21. And that's when I started to think that maybe it was every other odd number. So 29, so then you get, so it doesn't work on 27. 25 is the next odd number after that one, and then it works on the 21, so it works on every other odd number, so 29, 25, 21. So I thought, okay, well the next one that might work might be a 19. Sorry, not a 19, a 17, because we want every other odd number. So 17, and one that might work after that one would be 13, because that's the next odd number of the other odd numbers. And so those were the ones that I stuck on before the market ever got there, and those were the ones where I was looking to make trades for the future. So let's see what happens as time goes on. First of all, that once it's worked once, anybody who's got a ruler will go to this low down here, draw a line through there, and they'll be looking to buy when it touches here. So it's a trend line. Never ever trade anything that's obvious to other people. And so I wouldn't be interested the second time. Now, why did the market, for instance, bottom out here? Well, I would draw from here to get potential. Now, part of the program is if you go to that low there, it tells you what the closest angle is. And in this particular case, it's 32. Now 32 is a division of 1. So 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Those are Gann's basic angles. And you can see that when it touched there, it squared time and price. Now as we go forward, as I said, I wouldn't trade the 21 because it's now a trend line. The 17 was the one that I'd identified as being a point to buy. Now these are daily prices. Now when it actually got there, the market just went straight through the angle and showed absolutely no resistance on that day. And so if it's not going to work, that's exactly how I want it to do it. I just want it to go straight through. What I don't want it to do is stop exactly there and then start to rise, because then that might allow me to enter the market and then go through. So if it's not going to work, that's how I want it to do it. So my next one for the future was a 13. Now I've worked this out, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months before I ever got there at least. And let's see what happens. Let me just take these timings off. And you should be able to see that the actual low on the market was made on the 13 by 1 practically. Pretty amazing if you think about it. So the hard bit and where the skill comes in is knowing when things aren't working classically and how they might be working in the future. Now you might be asking yourself, why did the market bottom out there? Well, what's the odd number that's between 17 and 13? Well, it's 15. Sorry, if I drew it from the right place. It's 15. And you can see, and I cut the line when it gets broken, which is here. You can see that the exact bottom that was made when it was collapsing like a stone was made on 15. So that gives me, so you're going to say, well, how is that going to help me into the future? Well, it means that I'm going to be watching certain numbers with interest in the future. That one especially, and maybe because it's worked on one that isn't the odd number between odd numbers, I'm also going to watch 11. So that's doing it correctly, and I hope you enjoyed it.